What's up, everybody? It's Dakota, and today I'm going to be revisiting a deck that everyone thought was going to die after the Mox Opal and Oko bannings in Modern, and just kind of seeing how it's kind of shaped up now, a few weeks after the bannings. So, this is from the Team Open Philadelphia, took place about a week ago. Dimir Whirza is essentially come full circle from what the deck used to be when this card, Urza Lord High Artificer, first came out. So, just to go over it, Urza is a double blue and two for a 1/4 legendary creature human artificer that creates a 0/0 colorless construct, which this creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control. You can tap an untapped artifact you control to add a blue mana, and then you can pay 5, shuffle your library, exile the top card, and until end of turn you may play that card without paying its mana cost. Now, essentially, what the decks started out as, and kind of would have become now, they would play the combo of Sword of the Meek and Thopter Foundry. And with what this combo does is with Thopter Foundry and then either Sword of the Meek in your graveyard or in play, you could tap and an artifact, sacrifice it, make a 1/1 with Thopter Foundry. Bring Sword of the Mead back because you have a 1/1 come into play and the sword will attach to it. Then you tap Sword of the Meek for blue mana thanks to Urza, and then sacrifice it to Thopter Foundry to make another 1/1, which brings back the sword. And in doing this, you make an infinite number of 1/1s and then gain an infinite amount of life, which usually infinite life is good enough a lot of the time in Modern, just because things like Dredge can't beat you. Uh, really, Sahili combo and then like the other Urza decks and the Heliod combo decks are the ones that can kill you from infinite life. But as long as you have the Sword of the Meek plus Thopter Foundry plus Urza engine going, your opponents can't win the game because whenever they try to deal their infinite damage, you just gain infinite life, and then so on and so forth. And someone has to take a different action, and it just gets really weird. Plus, you just gum up the board with a ton of 1/1s too. So it's not very easy for them to get through damage even after you assemble this combo of infinite life. Plus, with infinite Thopters, you can activate Urza an infinite number of times, tapping them for mana and go through that way. But like, honestly, at that point, once you assembled this combo, you just either win the game or your opponent's going to sit there and try to figure out how they can beat infinite life, which most of the time your opponent's not going to be able to. So essentially, what else is the deck trying to do? Where are we going? So basically, you're relying on like a ton of interaction plus like a lot of really good artifacts like Arkham's Astrolabe, Mishra's Bauble. 8 cards were already that cantrip for either 0 mana or 1 mana. Mishra's Bauble, looking at the top card of a player's library, pretty fancy with like fetch lands because you can check to see if you want the card, and if you don't want it, you can just fetch it away, or you can just look at it, see that you want it, and then either play a shock land to then play another spell instead of another spell that you could have played, or playing the fetch land and just waiting until after you draw the card with Mishra's Bauble. Also can enable Revolt for Fatal Push, which might come up sometimes where like you don't necessarily want to draw a card on the next upkeep. You want to draw it on your next upkeep, so you could just crack Bauble on your opponent's turn, triggers Fatal Push, and then uh, can Fatal Push their creature. Astrolabe fixes mana, draws a card, does everything that you want it to do. Just really powerful. Two one-ofs that I'm assuming are like more metagame calls than anything, like Nihil Spellbomb with a lot of graveyard decks coming back. This is just like an artifact spell that you can play. If you need to crack it on turn 1, you can, and if you can wait at least another turn, you can end up drawing a card from it, which is really sweet. Pithing Needle, just really good at like shutting down planeswalkers. With Amulet Titan being a deck, you just name either their haste land, or you can name like any of their other fancy-ish lands with Pithing Needle to stop them from being able to activate those activated abilities, and really only leave them to activate mana abilities, which is what Pithing Needle can't stop. Talisman of Dominance is ramp in this deck, which is really good when you can play an Urza on turn 3 and really get that going. Because usually once you one tap with Urza, you can safely win the game, or at least get enough value off of him where you can just start beating your opponent down and outvaluing them. Fatal Push, just really good removal. Kills opposing Urzas. Really good against like the mono red decks. just by killing their things. Inquisition Thoughtseize, 5 discard spells in the deck. Very important because they are black spells versus most of the deck that wants to be like double blue. I mean, you have 3 different triple blue spells, so like obviously you don't want to play a ton of black spells because it messes up the mana and things like that. But we do have Astrolabe for fixing, so like if you really want to play an extra discard spell, you can. But like I think 5 is pretty safe for this deck. Deprive, which is kind of cute because you can pick up a land. You have to pick up a land to cast it, and you counter a spell. So you could like play Mystic Sanctuary, and this is like another spell that goes infinite with Mystic Sanctuary, where if you tap the Mystic Sanctuary to add mana, and you deprive to like counter a spell, and then you can pick up the deprive after you play the Mystic Sanctuary from the graveyard, put it on top, and then you can draw it with like a Mishra's Bauble trigger to then leave deprive back, or be able to like loop cryptic command and deprive by using cryptic to um, counter draw, and then drawing the deprive, and then being able to deprive back the Mystic Sanctuary to then basically like repeat the loop over and over again. Drown in the Lock, a card that we've talked about in like many different decks. It's a counter spell and a removal spell that gets better as the game goes long. Good at countering 1 drops, good at countering 6 drops. Just really powerful card. Archmage's Charm is a card that these Urza decks were playing before the ban, and then after are definitely really in for this card. Modal spells are always good. This one being a draw 2, counter, and then gain control over permanent that costs 1 or less. Especially good against mono red because you can take some of their early creatures, which can give you fits a lot of the time, like the Monastery Swiftspear is like whatever, but like the other 1 drop that they 1 drop prowess creature they play is definitely a nice target. This also has game against like Death Shadow too, because you can just take their shadow, and if your life total is low enough, like you get to keep the creature. If not, then it's like a removal spell for the Death Shadow, which is also pretty good too. Word of Invention is an improvise, essentially Court of Calling for artifacts, which essentially finds you any one of your other combo pieces like Sword of the Meek or Thopter Foundry. Cryptic Command, again, like kind of what we were talking about before, is Cryptic Command, or some number of Cryptic Commands in Mystic Sanctuary can just create this loop of like where you just get to counter your opponent's spell and then like bounce Mystic Sanctuary, or like a draw card bounce Mystic Sanctuary, things like that, and you just get to keep looping Cryptic Commands. And then if you get some other spells into the mix, you can actually start just like drawing Cryptic Command, and then for your draw step, you can just draw another spell, and then you can put the other Cryptic Command that you with Mystic Sanctuary on top of your library, and then just keep going from there. So you always have access to 2 Cryptic Commands in a turn if you need them. So that's it for the spells of the deck. The mana base is pretty simple. Darksteel Citadel is pretty free. It helps with like the artifact count, and if you have an Urza in play, you can tap it for blue mana instead of colorless mana. Flooded Strand, Misty Rainforest, Polluted Delta, and Scalding Tarn. Basically, the only fetch lands you want to run, even though the only one that can really get black mana is Polluted Delta. The reason why you play more blue fetches over the black fetches is for the fact that there is every land is fetchable except for the snow-covered island or snow-covered swamp, and Mystic Sanctuary is technically an island. So your blue fetch lands can get Mystic Sanctuaries. They can come into play untapped, and then they can put spells on top, essentially at instant speed if you need them to. So that's why you see Flooded Strand, Misty, Polluted Delta, and Scalding Tarn, and you don't really see like Bloodstained Mire or Marsh Flats or anything like that. Um, and of course, since the deck is mainly like blue mana and a lot of like colorless and snow mana, you see a lot more snow covered islands. And again, we need a set number of islands to make Mystic Sanctuary good and come into play untapped. The sideboard, another Sword of the Meek if you really need it, another Thopter Foundry, Ashiok for the Titan decks. Dead of Winter is just a really good Wrath because you play a ton of snow permanents. Mystical Disputes, 1 mana interaction. Kalitas, really good against those pesky dredge and graveyard decks. Ether Gust, very powerful against the mono red aggro decks. And Grafdigger's Cage, more hate for the graveyard decks. And that's Dimir Whirza for modern. New deck, same deck that became a new deck because of Oko, that then became back to the old deck, and has kind of definitely put up results. Ely Cassis playing the deck very reliably and looking really good with it as well. So it would be interesting to see what this deck does moving forward as the meta changes and everything. If you guys enjoyed the video, please leave a like. Consider subscribing for more deck techs and other discussions, things like that. I have a few new videos that I plan on coming out this week, so that's going to be really cool. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.